Well, as you know, the borders are effectively closed right now, so we haven't got any immigration coming into the country other than a very small number. And next financial year, the forecast is for an 85% reduction in the ordinary immigration intake. So that's a very significant reduction, and obviously that has economic consequences for the country as well, which we'll need to make up through other mechanisms, particularly by boosting productivity. And that's a point the Prime Minister's been making, that every lever is got to be geared towards that so that we can get people back to work, we can get incomes back to where they were before this coronavirus hit.
This comes at the same time, though, that the government's been pushing anyone who is in Australia right now on a temporary visa to go home, to not be putting pressure on the population. Is that a short-sighted strategy? Well,
just to be clear, we've got a more nuanced message than that. If you're an international tourist and you're here and you don't have any family support, then yes, we encourage people to return home. Those temporary visa holders who have got work and are essential for their particular company to continue with work, then of course they need to continue to do that. But if they've lost their job, then in the ordinary expectation is that they do return home because they no longer have work available. Now, that's a very different position that we have versus what the Labor Party has. The Labor Party is saying that every single one of those temporary migrants should be getting welfare and should be getting access to the JobKeeper payments, and that would keep those people here longer. And that's also a $20 billion decision. Whereas we are saying that, sure, if you've got a job here and it's been maintained, then please continue to do that. But if you've lost your job, then you might consider returning home.
And that welfare payments, as is ordinarily the case, won't be available to you.
My understanding of the Labor position is that they're saying that the people who could be working in essential fields should be staying, and we should be keeping that stopgap going so we don't have shortages in key industries like aged care. Do you think that's a reasonable proposition?
Well, no, their proposition is that every single one of the 2.1 million visa holders in the country right now should have access to welfare or the JobKeeper payment, a $20 billion proposition. Our position is that we reserve welfare and we reserve the JobKeeper payment to Australians and permanent residents because we are deliberately prioritising them, and we're maintaining that expectation that people who come into the country on a temporary basis are able to look after themselves, and if they are not, then they do return home. Now, we're facilitating them being able to look after themselves by giving them access to their superannuation while they're here in the country. But otherwise, if they have lost their job and they don't have family support, then we do encourage them to return home where they will have that support. Now, in relation specifically to some of those high demand areas, we've actually made some changes to enable people to work longer or to stay in the country for a lengthier period of time, and particularly in the health area and particularly in the ag area. And we've enabled, for example, in that area, international students to be able to work some longer hours than they otherwise are able to do, and also for backpackers to more easily work, particularly in the agricultural sector, where that sector relies so heavily on the backpackers to pick the fruit and sow the crops and the like.
Now, if I can move on to another topic of the day, we've just had New South Wales Deputy Premier John Barilaro rule himself out for a run at Eden-Monaro. Would you like to see Andrew Constance have a run at the seat?
I work pretty closely with Andrew Constance as the Infrastructure Minister in New South Wales, and he's a very capable individual, but I imagine we'll have quite a few people who will put up their hand and give it a go. I know Senator Jim Molan is considering it as well. At the end of the day, there'll be a proper process which the Liberal Party in New South Wales goes through to select a candidate. I'm very confident we'll have a good one, and we'll give it our best shot, but also setting expectations that the last time a government won a seat from an opposition in a by-election was 100 years ago. So it's a very, very mammoth task to try to win that seat back, but obviously we'll put our best foot forward.
Do you think that there shouldn't be a complete rule out of any Nationals candidate, just leave it to the Libs to try and take on Labor?
Oh, no, we have a coalition agreement, and that means that where there is an empty seat as such, then both parties are able to contest, and that's perfectly reasonable. That happens all the time. And so the National Party is quite legitimately able to field a candidate. As a Liberal, I'd like to see a Liberal win, but I stress it's going to be an absolute Herculean task for either of the coalition parties to win this seat, given it's been 100 years since the government won a seat off the opposition in a by-election.
And just finally, we've seen the schools debate kick on. There has been a bit of backlash to Dan Tehan's comments about Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews saying that he's taken a sledgehammer to the school system there. Now we've got 2 schools that have had to shut down because of coronavirus cases. Do you think that vindicates the Victorian Premier's position?
Well, my understanding of the Victorian case was that the teacher who contracted the virus did not contract it at the school from a student. That's been made pretty clear in the media today. She contracted it elsewhere. From our perspective, the evidence is pretty clear that schools are safe places to go when we want to see the schools open. And in relation to Dan Tehan's comments, I think he made his position clear yesterday, particularly with his follow-up statement.